Welcome to 2026. I wanted to take some time to make this video because I have joined all the major social media networks to promote civilsimian.com. I've joined Instagram, X, Blue Sky. When I first started those social pages, I had put something up and it was universality is unquestionable. And so, first of all, let me tell you what universality means in this context. It's everything that humans share before they choose. It's whatever all humans share that's deterministic. Sometimes that's necessary, sometimes it's not necessary. Sometimes it's just particularity expressed in the minds of individuals. The ideas, universality is going to produce deterministic ideas as well as subjectively particular ideas and subjectively particular ideas in which people gain a following and agreement. And those ideas are still particular, but they float around in the intellectual space along with the universals. The universals are always going to arise because they're a reflection of the deterministic physical reality. So when I say something like universality is unquestionable, the first thing I'm getting at is that universality is just a description of what is. That's what makes it unquestionable. If you question what is, you've deviated from objective reality. And so it's very close to the physical determinism of reality. The closer you can get to the physical determinism of reality, the more universal it is. And so obviously science is going to be getting as close to it as possible. But science has shortcomings because science doesn't have tools to measure everything. Science is basically determined in such a way that it can only revolve around the tools that it has to measure things. That doesn't account for all of reality. It actually only accounts for a small bit. And it's the bit that's driving technology right now. So when I say basically universality, I'm talking about what science can prove, but also that which science doesn't have the mechanisms to prove, which can be validated through, as much as possible statistics, but also just intersubjective validation by using the senses. Common sense, in other words. But when people say common sense, they charge that word with it's basically everything that I do is the right thing. That's not the common sense that I mean. I mean your basic everyday smell, your basic everyday sight, your basic everyday auditory capability, something's hot, something's cold, these basic senses that we have. A lot of reality can be expressed through natural language and basic sense. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is pattern recognition, okay? And I try to write my philosophies, I try to do everything I can on basic pattern recognition. I try not to get caught up into the categories and sort of deviate off into what institutions have decided are categorical and what has to be answered and what has been not answered correctly to meet the categorical definitions. I love that stuff. I love that they do that. It's so amazing. But you have to imagine that change language, change physical reality, change regional aspects, and this whole academic context changes. Certain concepts will be blended together, other ones split apart in one language, and then in another language they're together, But regardless of language, regardless of regional particularity, regardless of historical particularity, universals stand, and universals are determined. And this is what I mean by universality is unquestionable. It's unquestionable because you don't get to say, my subgroup is more important than universality. Universality is a description of what is. It's not an ideology that you follow. It's not prescriptive. It's the first realization of being. Universality is what humanity is, deterministically and physically. And ethics and morality and goodness and evil emerges out of this physical determinism, which no one alive today has control over or had control over in the past. We all are what we are through mechanisms that we have no control over. And so we're all in the same boat. And the things that we do affect everyone else. It's almost a limited system all around, right? And so when I talk about universality, a good example of it is just water. There was one previous channel that I did to this channel, but there was a video on it talking about the universality of water. Clean water is the perfect example of how ethics emerges. And just leaving you with that, right? That's the YouTube hook. Clean water will teach you what is good and what is evil, because all humans need water. Do you know, or have you ever heard of a human that doesn't need water to survive? Water is also a limited resource. It's not that we can't make desalination plants. It's not that there's not ways to make more water. It's just that the limitations and the balancing act we have to play creates a situation by which justice has to be evaluated. Symmetry and asymmetry, the effects on humans, that basic scientific, observable, intersubjective reality has to be watched, right? So we don't kill off 1 million people to save 2 people. It's absurd, right? So if I was in a trolley car situation and I was going to kill off 1 million people to save 2 people just because I wasn't paying attention to the symmetry or asymmetry of the moment, wouldn't that be evil? I mean, if that's not evil, then nothing is. And the existentialists are totally correct that the universe is indifferent, including the will of humans. But that isn't correct, because the will of free agents creates the situation where we can emerge, elevate, and transcend and be better than what nature is in itself. And who knows, maybe this was a flaw in the deterministic reality that we're supposed to be a part of. Maybe they screwed up and we've got more free will than we're supposed to have. Maybe we were supposed to imagine ourselves having free will but not actually having it, and they weren't able to contain that. I don't know. I mean, and when I talk like this, I'm talking from the perspective of life being a test, okay? If you think that life's a test rather than just a stone rolling down a hill. To me, the objective physical reality, the way it's set up, is set up in such a way that we have a spatio-temporal fixation, our bodies, right? We have no choice. We're in a certain place at a certain time. There's no choice. Your individuality is determined. So get your mind around that. My individuality is determined. I have no choice but to be an individual. But somewhere in there, you have a common physical ancestor in the past that you share with everybody else in the world. That common physical universal, and the fact that none of us alive created life, or the mechanism that we're all just kind of surfing on, none of us created it, creates the implication that none of us as individuals should assume the power to destroy it, right? That is sort of implied because there's only a couple different options, right? Good is going to assume that I have to preserve life because it's part of the larger order. Evil is going to assume that I'm the one who decides what lives and what dies because I'm somehow special. So the notion that my subgroup or I am somehow special is the true disease that we need to eliminate, because it gains critical mass, turns around and attacks that which is determined, the true sacred. I should say it doesn't gain momentum and turn around and attack. It's more like it gains backwards momentum from the time that it starts all the way. It never turns around and notices what it is. It always denies itself. It never gains the realization of what it is. Because gaining the realization of what life is to become truly humble, not performatively humble, but to truly understand how small you are in this mechanism, what it took to become what you are, that you're so special you can't even imagine. You don't have to try to be special, becomes a part of some group that has been destined or chosen, that, your genetics, I'm this kind of person, I'm that kind of person, I'm from here, your nationality, all this shit, honestly, is subgroup BS. We could do away with all of it and focus on our humanity. And so this is my proposal. First of all, religions should use universal humanism as a plug-in, right? Religions are often formulated hodgepodge, and then there's direction here and there, and people don't agree on things, and you end up with a mass that's full of particularity that nobody can accept because of that particularity. Religion is something like the true mechanism, the unquestionable mechanism of it is something that should rally around universality. And the only way to do that is to strip away every possible particular that you can, rally around what is, focus on human necessity, and make it unquestionable. And so this is what I mean when I say universality is unquestionable. That universality is a description of what is, and if you then capitalize on brainwashing people and trying to teach them that objective reality is just another particular, you've basically committed the highest level of existential crime that can be committed in human life or in life in general, is that you've turned your back on the deterministic order. You have no respect for the deterministic order, which existed before you choose. It exists before you gain the ability to choose. And all it's really saying out there is, look, you can be good and you can be evil, and that's all measured by how you cause in a sea of other people. You know, if you don't cause any harm, but you don't do any good, so you disappear, and it's much better than if you cause harm. You can go and try to do good too, but if you can't do good, just avoid causing harm and you're all good. That's it. If life is a test, that's it. Just avoid causing harm. You know, it's a lot of the stuff that's going on out there in the world. We can try to make a difference, but we're just a little blip. We don't have control over these larger power structures that were here before we even existed, that have been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years, some of them. So just don't cause harm. That's like your only duty. So anyway, that's just wanted to explain that. Civil Simian's up, and there's forums in there if anybody wants to come and discuss. It's I'm not gonna lie, it's an empty shell in there, but I mean, I keep everything inside. The only thing that I keep front facing on the site is the inputs, the content inputs, but the forums and everything, I don't let anybody see that. So it's for private use for people who register. Anyway, if you guys like this kind of philosophical subject matter, help us out by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.